Hey guys, I'm Saurav, and in this video I will show you how to shoot a video with a DSLR. This video will be divided into two sections. In the first section, I will explain you what is FPS and what should be the camera settings for smooth videos. In the second part, I will explain you certain tips and tricks so that you can level up your quality of the video. So let's start. Let's talk about FPS. FPS is basically frames per second. Now in DSLR you have options like 24 FPS, 30 FPS, 50 FPS and 60 FPS. Now depending on what kind of look do you want, you have to set the FPS. If you want a kind of a cinematic look, you should use 24 FPS. If you want much more smoother looking videos, you can switch to 30, 50 and 60 FPS. Basically, if the FPS is more, the file size is going to increase, but the videos will look much more smoother. So depending on what kind of look do you want, you have to adjust the FPS. Now let's talk about shutter speed. It's a very hard and fast rule that you have to double the FPS and use the closest shutter speed option which is offered by your camera. For example, if you're shooting at 24 FPS, double it, it's 148. So the closest shutter speed to 148 is 1/50th of a second. So for 24 FPS, use 1/50th of a second. For 30 FPS, use 1/60th of a second. For 50 FPS, use 100th of a second. And for 60 FPS, you double it, you get 120. But since you don't have 120, use 1/125th of a second as the shutter speed. Remember, if you don't use the correct shutter speed for the correct FPS, then your videos won't look smooth and your videos will look choppy. So make sure you decide what FPS do you want and adjust the shutter speed according to it. Now let's talk about aperture. Now to set the aperture, you have to decide what kind of depth of field do you want. If you're not clear about aperture, I have a separate video about it. So the link will be down in the description or popping somewhere in the cards above. And basically, if you want the background to be blurred, use a higher aperture like f1.4 or f2.8 or even f4. If you're going to decrease the aperture to f8, f10, f11, you're going to introduce much more background into the frame. So if you want the whole scene to be in focus, use a lower aperture at about f10 or f11. And if you want the subject to be separated from the background, use a higher aperture like f2.8 or something like that, right? Now let's talk about ISO. Now to decide the ISO, I'm going to use the camera's histogram. So if the camera's histogram is extremely to the right, it means it's a very bright video and overexposed video. So you want to decrease the ISO and bring it to the center. If the histogram is extremely to the left, you have to increase the ISO and bring it to the center. Basically, you do not want the video to be extremely dark or you do not want the video to be extremely bright. So according to the histogram, adjust the ISO so that you get a properly exposed video. Now let's talk about focusing. Now this is the most asked question about like what should I focus, how should I focus? And the answer is use manual focusing. Now some cameras have amazing autofocus even in video mode, but manual focus is the best option. Manual focus gives you a lot more control over the focusing, and basically you can shift from one point to the other by twisting or by moving the focus ring. And then if you're shooting a still shot, you can probably autofocus on the subject first and then switch to manual focus so that the focus will be locked and throughout the video you have perfectly focused subject. So that throughout the video you won't have hunting, you won't have autofocus hunting. So it's very highly recommended that you use manual focusing for video. Now let's talk about white balance. Now white balance is generally ignored, but it is very important. Basically it is responsible for the colors of the video. So if you have not set the white balance properly, then basically the colors will be different, and to fix it in the post is very difficult and time consuming. So I would recommend to use a gray card. So basically you can use a gray card as a reference and set the white balance so that you get natural colors in your videos, and it is very crucial to get good colors so that your videos look very lively and natural. So this was all about camera settings. Now let me give you some tips for increasing the video quality and shooting better video. So the first tip is focusing on the composition. Now I understand gears are important, cameras are important, lighting is important, but what if the composition is not good? If the composition is not good, then it means nothing. So make sure you're using some kind of composition rule. Maybe to begin with, use rule of thirds, and then there are again various compositions like you can use symmetry. So basically try to kind of experiment with compositions, try to use different camera angles so that you get unique looking videos. The second tip is to use prime lenses. Now this is a bit optional, but again, prime lenses are something that is going to deliver much more better quality than other lenses. Now, zoom lenses, kit lenses are good, but prime lenses in the same price range is going to give you much more quality, and basically prime lenses have higher aperture. So you can maybe use a higher aperture like f1.8, f2.8, and then basically the subject will be completely separated from the background. And prime lens has beautiful sharpness and amazing color rendition that will surely increase the quality of your videos. So if you are on a budget, get a 35mm or a 50mm as per your needs. The third tip is to level the camera. Now, it might seem very obvious. It's like, of course we would level our camera, but sometimes we tend to forget this. And if you go home and you watch the video is slant and then you try to rotate it and correct it a bit, then you zoom it, basically you're losing resolution. So it's better to always level your camera before shooting so that you don't have to mess up in post-production. The last but not the least is to use a sturdy tripod. Now, you have used all the correct settings, you have used all the perfect camera gear, but again, if the camera footage is shaky, then it doesn't look good. Use a sturdy tripod so that your videos look stabilized, your videos don't have any shake in that, and that will probably increase your video quality by a lot. So use a sturdy tripod, invest on a sturdy tripod, invest on a prime lens. But again, if you don't have this gear, you don't have this expensive gear, it's fine. You just have to keep experimenting and try to shoot the best video with the gear you have, because that is what is going to improve the video quality. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if it helped you, press the like button and subscribe to my channel. I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.